Empty your pockets. The words sliced through the silence of the marble kitchen like a judge's gavel. At that moment, something shifted in the air, because the man issuing the order had no idea who he was really dealing with. 62-year-old real estate mogul Thomas Whitmore stood in the doorway, eyes fixed on his housekeeper of 8 months, Monica Daniels, a poised black woman in her mid-30s. Her hands paused mid-motion over a dish towel, and she turned to face him, not with guilt or panic, but with a calmness that unnerved him. His voice sharpened. His wife's $15,000 diamond bracelet had gone missing, and Monica had been the only one cleaning the bedroom that day. But instead of cowering or pleading, Monica raised an eyebrow. "You thought of me first," she said, her tone, even though something steel-like rippled beneath her calm. Thomas had built his empire believing people like Monica were predictable, easy to fire, too afraid to fight back. He'd done it before pushing out dozens of minority employees under vague accusations. But Monica wasn't trembling. She smiled a quiet, unsettling smile and slowly pulled out her phone. "Before we empty my pockets, let's call the police," she said, offering the suggestion like a well-rehearsed line in a play she had been expecting to perform. In that moment, Thomas realized he wasn't just confronting a maid. He was standing face to face with a woman who had prepared for this confrontation, and suddenly he was no longer the one in control. The doorbell rang once, twice, then again, each chime sharper than the last, echoing through the grand estate like a warning shot. Monica Daniels didn't flinch. She stepped away from Thomas Whitmore and toward the front door, moving with a confidence that turned the spacious, marble-floored hallway into a stage she had claimed as her own. Thomas, still frozen by the kitchen island, didn't know what unnerved him more, the accusation he'd just made, or the way Monica seemed to welcome it. As the front door creaked open, voices drifted in, layered in English and Spanish. Warm yet purposeful, the kind of voices that weren't here by accident. 3 women entered first, each one dignified, composed, and instantly familiar. Mrs. Hudson, Ms. Grant, and Mrs. Bennett. They'd each worked for Thomas in the past, all dismissed under nearly identical circumstances, missing items, vague accusations, no police involved, just threats, silence, and ruined reputations. Thomas' breath caught in his throat as the women stepped into his living room and sat not awkwardly or uncertainly, but like people with rights, not roles. And then came David Carter, a sharply dressed man in a navy blue suit who placed a sleek leather briefcase on the coffee table, with the calm precision of a man who had evidence. "Mr. Whitmore," Monica called from the doorway, her voice stripped of the subservient tone he'd always expected. "We'd like to have a word with you in the living room." Stiffly, Thomas followed, now fully aware that something bigger than a missing bracelet was unfolding. When he entered, David Carter stood extending a hand Thomas refused to shake. "I'm Mr. Carter, an attorney representing Ms. Daniels and several others you may recognize. Over the last 8 months, my client has gathered documentation regarding a disturbing pattern of racial discrimination and wrongful termination at this residence." Thomas scoffed a weak attempt at authority. "I have the right to protect my property. Things go missing and when they do—" Monica interrupted, her voice no longer soft. "You accuse the black staff every single time. You don't question your wife's friends, your delivery men, your house guests, just us." The other women spoke in turn. Mrs. Hudson fired for allegedly stealing cash that turned up in Thomas' own jacket. Ms. Grant let go after a set of cufflinks went missing, only to later learn they'd been packed in a travel bag. And Mrs. Bennett, the longest-serving of the 3, was blamed for a ring that eventually reappeared in Thomas' wife's car months later. Each woman's story was another brick in the case Monica had been building, not just against Thomas' racism, but against his sense of untouchable entitlement. Monica had studied him in silence for months, watching the way he treated people who looked like her, listening to his jokes about lazy workers and people always looking for a handout. But the day he accused her, the wrong woman, was the day his carefully constructed empire began to crack. He still didn't know it yet, but the trap had already sprung, and the people he'd tried to erase were about to remind him they had never truly disappeared. The room was silent, except for the rustle of papers and the steady hum of a ticking wall clock, each second dragging Thomas Whitmore further from the illusion of control he had always believed was his birthright. David Carter. The attorney opened his briefcase and began spreading documents across the coffee table like a dealer laying down a royal flush. These, he said calmly, are transcripts of recorded conversations, notarized witness statements, and internal reports, some of which directly contradict your claims against these women. Thomas didn't reach for the documents. His arms remained folded, jaw tight, face flushed, but his eyes betrayed a growing panic. Monica Daniels, standing beside the fireplace with quiet poise, revealed the next card, her phone. She tapped the screen once, and the room filled with the unmistakable sound of Thomas' own voice, recorded in a hushed phone conversation. "This Monica seems perfect. She looks like shed steel if she had the chance. When we need a scapegoat, she'll be ideal. Those people always have a cousin in need of bail money." The sound of his words playing back in his own living room was like a grenade detonating in slow motion. Thomas staggered back half a step, momentarily stunned. The very racism he'd spoken behind closed doors now filled the space like toxic smoke. The women in the room didn't flinch, they'd heard worse. But this time, he was the one exposed. The silence afterward was thick with consequence. "Still think this is about a bracelet?" Monica asked, her tone no longer courteous, but charged with the righteous anger of someone who had swallowed indignity for too long. "That recording was from 3 weeks ago. I have over 40 hours worth documenting how you treat black employees, how you brag about firing them without cause, how you refer to us as disposable." Thomas opened his mouth to respond, but another voice interrupted. Mrs. Hudson, the older of the women, rose from the couch, her tone calm but heavy with pain. "You destroyed my name, Mr. Whitmore. I lost my home, my job, my reference. I worked for you for over a year, and when your checkbook went missing, you looked at me like I didn't deserve to be there. 2 days later, you found it in your golf bag. But you never called me, never said a word." David Carter leaned forward, sliding another document across the table. "And here we have the incident report from that very situation. You wrote that Mrs. Hudson was no longer a good fit for the household, but you didn't report the found checkbook to the agency, nor did you revise her employment file. Instead, you blacklisted her." Thomas' hands were trembling now, barely concealed behind clenched fists. Monica took a breath, steady and resolute. "You see, Thomas, I didn't take this job to clean your home. I took it to investigate you. I have a degree in investigative journalism. Before this, I worked at a major newspaper until I began investigating discriminatory hiring practices among Seattle's wealthiest homeowners. I lost my job for asking too many questions, so I took this one to finish what I started." She pulled a small voice recorder from behind a bookshelf, followed by 2 more, hidden behind the curtains. "You had a habit of making your most compromising calls in here while I vacuumed. You thought I wasn't listening, but I was. You never noticed, because to you I was invisible." The weight of those words hit harder than any accusation could have. Thomas' face was now pale, his shoulders sagging as if gravity had turned on him. "You built your success by stepping on the backs of people you thought would never speak," Monica continued. "But now we're all here watching you answer for it." And then the final blow came. Monica turned her phone back around, showing a live stream already underway. Over 15,000 viewers were watching the confrontation unfold. Reporters, legal observers, and advocates had been notified. This wasn't just a private reckoning. It was public, irreversible, and documented in real time. Thomas Whitmore, the man who once held court in every room he entered, now sat speechless in his own home, surrounded by those he once dismissed slowly, realizing that his carefully built walls of privilege had become the very prison he couldn't escape. Thomas Whitmore's hands twitched nervously at his sides, the color drained from his face as he struggled to process the reality unfolding around him. His empire, once built on intimidation, manipulation, and a well-maintained illusion of control, was unraveling at the seams. The live stream Monica Daniels had initiated now ticked past 22,000 viewers, the number growing by the second. Comments flooded in like a tide. Fire him, she's a hero, expose everything. Thomas' phone began to vibrate uncontrollably on the table text after text from business partners, his lawyer, his secretary. He snatched it up desperately, dialing. "Harvey, it's me. I need you at my house. Right now. It's bad. Really bad." He paused, listening. Then his voice cracked. "What do you mean you can't represent me? We've been friends for 20 years. A moment later, he whispered into the receiver. "Conflict of interest. What the hell does that mean?" David Carter folded his arms and offered a grim smile. "It means, Mr. Whitmore, that your usual legal lifelines are already accounted for. My office now represents not just Monica, but every woman in this room. Any attorney who touches your case now risks disbarment." Monica stood tall, eyes sharp with determination. "For 8 months I listened to your deals. Every favor you called and every inspector you paid off. You'd whisper to your accountant how mysterious inventory losses were a perfect excuse to fire staff and make room for new contracts. You thought no one was listening, but I recorded everything." She walked to his bookshelf, retrieving tiny digital recorders hidden behind awards and leather-bound ledgers, symbols of his wealth and influence, now turned into evidence. "Thursday mornings," she said, with a coolness that chilled the room. "That's when you liked to make your cleanup calls while I was vacuuming. That's when you thought I was most distracted. But really it was when you were the most vulnerable." Thomas staggered back into his chair, sweat glistening on his forehead. Every instinct in him screamed for damage control, but he was cornered strategically, deliberately, and legally. "You don't understand," he stammered. "I know people, judges, prosecutors. This won't what Monica shot back. Won't ruin you because it already has. People are watching. Your stockholders, your clients, the media. You built your life on silencing people like us, and now you can't even finish a sentence without the world calling you out." The tension in the room thickened as Thomas' phone pinged again. This time, it was a notification from a major news outlet real estate tycoon accused of systemic racism in explosive live broadcast. The headline was accompanied by a screen capture of Monica, standing tall in his living room with Thomas blurred in the background, mouth agape. The image would become iconic proof that the invisible maid he once dismissed had become the one voice he couldn't silence, and still Monica wasn't finished. "This isn't just about your words or your theft accusations. It's about every contract you won through corruption, every inspector you paid off, every worker you trampled along the way. I followed you. I filmed you. I even attended some of your off-the-books meetings on the weekends when I told you I needed the extra hours to pay for my daughter's tuition. She graduated 5 years ago, Thomas." She leaned in. "You gave me the keys to your kingdom, and now I'm using them to tear down every brick built on hate." Thomas Whitmore slumped into his leather armchair like a deflated king, surrounded not by loyal advisors, but by witnesses, plaintiffs, and a mountain of evidence he couldn't deny. His once confident posture crumbled under the growing weight of Monica Daniels' investigation, an 8-month operation that now threatened not just his reputation, but his freedom. Yet the blows weren't done landing. Mrs. Bennet, silent until now, stepped forward, her voice steady and sharp. She came to me 6 months ago, she said, nodding toward Monica. Told me she believed I was innocent. I thought she was crazy, just a housekeeper playing detective. But she had a plan. And look at us now. David Carter, the attorney, opened a new folder and announced with clinical precision, Monica Daniels is not just a former journalist, she's a Columbia University graduate with a specialty in exposing corruption in high-net-worth communities. She lost her position at the Seattle Herald after investigating city contracts tied to race-based firings and exploitative business owners. Thomas's face twisted disbelief etched into his furrowed brow. You mean this entire time? Monica didn't gloat. Instead, she walked to the mantel, picked up a framed photo of Thomas shaking hands with the mayor, and turned it face down. I've spent 8 months documenting everything you are, your real estate scams, your racial profiling, your fraud, all while making your bed and scrubbing your floors. Because you never saw me as a threat. Just another black maid grateful for a paycheck. Then, with calm precision, she held up her phone once more. And the world still doesn't know the half of it. She tapped the screen, revealing a live Instagram broadcast still running. The viewer count now hovered just over 35,000, the comment section flying so fast it was unreadable. Every time you belittled me, every time you rolled your eyes at my questions, you gave me another reason to stay quiet and gather more. The faces in the room, all women he had once humiliated, looked back at Thomas with fire in their eyes. There was no pity, only justice, trying to salvage some control. Thomas lunged forward, reaching for Monica's phone, but David Carter stepped in his path, blocking him like a bouncer at the gates of consequence. Any attempt to interfere, he warned, will be considered witness intimidation, and it's all being recorded. Thomas' bravado shattered. His lips trembled. You've ruined me, he whispered. Monica tilted her head, her voice like a calm blade. No, Thomas. You did that yourself. I just made sure the world finally saw it. Mrs. Grant stepped forward next, holding an envelope in her hands. She helped us file the lawsuits. Not just wrongful termination, but defamation, emotional distress, racial discrimination. And with the evidence she gathered, she handed the envelope to Carter, who nodded approvingly. Your empire? Monica said taking one last look around the house she'd cleaned for nearly a year wasn't built on hard work. It was built on silence, abuse, and fear. She paused, letting that truth sink in. But you underestimated the wrong Maid, and now the whole world gets to watch you answer for it, brick by brick, lie by lie. Thomas Whitmore's phone buzzed again. This time, it slipped from his sweaty hands and clattered onto the floor. He didn't bother picking it up. His screen had already been flooded with chaos, canceled contracts, messages from alarmed board members, and urgent alerts from PR advisors trying and failing to contain the firestorm. Harrison Properties, once considered untouchable, was imploding in real time. 3 of their largest municipal development deals had been terminated within the last hour, according to a notification Monica casually read aloud from her own phone. Looks like your company is hemorrhaging trust faster than we expected, she said, her voice cool, clinical like a surgeon observing an expected outcome. Funny how quickly people abandon you once they realize who you really are. Thomas tried again to muster a defense. This is blackmail. You can't just ambush me in my home and expect— You're not being ambushed, David Carter interrupted with lawyerly poise. You're being held accountable. And as for blackmail, Mr. Whitmore, no one here is asking you for anything under the table. What we want is justice, loud, legal, and public. Monica folded her arms, her posture steady, her eyes unwavering. You thought accusing me of stealing would shame me into disappearing quietly like the others. But all it did was give me the final piece I needed to launch the trap you've been walking into for years. Then, with a slight turn toward the camera, still broadcasting, she added, To everyone watching, this is what systemic racism looks like when you strip away the PR spin. This is what happens when people like Thomas Whitmore think no one's keeping score. Across the room, Thomas' expression shifted from denial to something deeper, recognition. Not of guilt, perhaps, but of loss. Loss of image, loss of power, loss of the myth had built around himself piece by piece, deal by deal, lie by lie. His shoulders sagged under the pressure of a truth that could no longer be buried. It was in Monica's words, in the legal folders on the coffee table, in the eyes of the women he had fired, shamed and forgotten. And now it was in the headlines being written as he sat there in silence. Suddenly the doorbell rang again, sharp and deliberate. Everyone turned as Monica stepped toward the door without hesitation. When she opened it, 2 detectives from the Seattle Police Department stood waiting, their badges visible, their expressions grim. One of them, a tall man with salt and pepper hair, addressed Thomas calmly but firmly. "Mr. Whitmore, we have a warrant to search the premises. We need to speak with you regarding financial misconduct and irregularities in municipal contract bids tied to Harrison Properties." Thomas' mouth opened, but no words came out. Monica stepped back, clearing a path. "They'll find everything they need," she said simply. "I made sure of it." As the detectives entered and began inspecting the files and devices Monica had laid out in advance, the truth settled into the room like a fog no one could deny. For the first time, Thomas Whitmore realized this was no longer a confrontation, it was a reckoning. One that had been designed, orchestrated, and executed by the very woman he had once dismissed as invisible. Now she was the architect of his collapse, and the world was watching every second of it. As the detectives fanned out through the house, opening drawers and photographing hidden files, Thomas Whitmore remained frozen in his chair, his empire collapsing around him, one revelation at a time. The man who once boasted about manipulating city contracts and firing suspicious workers without consequence was now reduced to a spectator in his own downfall. Monica Daniels, standing tall amid the wreckage, adjusted her blouse and turned off the live stream. The viewer count had surpassed 50,000 each one, bearing witness to a truth too long buried. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her victory wasn't in Thomas' ruin, it was in the justice reclaimed by every woman he'd tried to silence. Mrs. Hudson, Ms. Grant, and Mrs. Bennett each approached Monica with quiet nods of gratitude, their dignity restored, their voices finally heard. Life has a way of teaching us that true strength doesn't come from wealth, titles, or control. It comes from courage, preparation, and the unshakable belief that injustice must be exposed no matter how powerful the oppressor. Monica was never just a maid. She was a mirror, reflecting back every ounce of corruption Thomas had hidden for years. If this story moved you, drop a comment below. Have you ever been underestimated or watched someone rise when the odds were stacked against them? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that remind us sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one you never saw coming.